The following program includes descriptions of child sexual exploitation and trafficking, and the content will be upsetting for some viewers. Firstly, they identify and they target the victim. Secondly, they gain trust and access. Thirdly, they will play a role in the child's life. Fourthly, they will isolate the child. Number 5, they will create secrecy around the relationship. Number 6, they will initiate sexual contact. And number 7, they will control the relationship. Perpetrators rely on the secrecy of the relationship to keep it going and to ensure that the child will not reveal the abuse. Now, this type of abuse is often referred to as grooming, and the culprit is usually not alone but within a network, and that results in the term grooming gang. Now, one of the major issues with reporting on grooming gangs is the fact that the term is disputed, with no legal meaning or agreed definition. There is little consensus on what constitutes a grooming gang or a grooming gang's offender, as opposed to any other type of abuser of children operating in a group, which likely makes it easier for the term to be applied selectively in media coverage and political debate.
Given the ethnic identities of many of the perpetrators, is that still the case?
I think so. And I always say, we're in 2018 and we still can't say Pakistani, Muslim or child rape in the same sentence without being said, we're racist, Islamophobic, or we're trying to brand an entire community. Now, I'm not trying to do any of that, and to be honest, I don't think many people are.
But you want to be clear in your language?
Yeah, all races commit abuse, and we need to accept that. We need to accept that actually some Pakistani Muslims are too. So let's accept that and then actually get on with tackling the problem.
And in many cases, including here in Rochdale, where girls were trafficked by men, police failed to act for fear of being branded racist. In 2020, the Home Office produced the findings of a major report, which found, in fact, that in the majority of cases, child sexual exploitation gangs were actually comprised of white men.
The prominent demographics of this type of crime, specifically group-based child sexual exploitation, mainly is perpetrated against white working-class girls and is mainly perpetrated by South Asian Pakistani men. This is clear as day. This is an irrefutable fact, and to completely ignore that, to whitewash it, to brush it over, only once again serves to protect the predators and the paedophiles.
To what extent is the community from which the vast majority of the men doing this to blame? And we're talking about Pakistani British men.
Criminality begins and ends with a criminal. Let's start with that. And we all know that most sex offenders in this country are British white men. But when it comes to this type of model of grooming, street grooming, yes, British Pakistani men are disproportionately involved.
Very, very true. When it comes to this form of grooming, it is very clear, abundantly clear, that British Pakistanis are at the forefront of this heinous criminal offence. Grooming gang is the term media commonly refers for this type of abuse towards children in reference in British Pakistani men, whilst the term child sex ring is often used for native or white British counterparts. Now, this type of abuse is often referred to as grooming, and the culprit is usually not alone but within a network, and that results in the term grooming gang. Now, one of the major issues with reporting on grooming gangs is the fact that the term is disputed, with no legal meaning or agreed definition. There is little consensus on what constitutes a grooming gang or a grooming gang's offender, as opposed to any other type of abuser of children operating in a group, which likely makes it easier for the term to be applied selectively in media coverage and political debate. According to the Centre of Media Monitoring in 2023, they said the following: the perception of grooming gangs as a problem particular to the Pakistani Muslim community is rooted in the language used around child sexual abuse involving groups. Recent examples show that the term grooming gangs seems to be effectively reserved for those cases involving predominantly British Pakistani perpetrators. referred to sometimes as Pakistani, Asian or Muslim in different media outlets. One case in Bristol also saw many media outlets use the term grooming for perpetrators of Somali heritage. It is true that there has been high-profile sexual abuse, prosecutions involving groups of primarily British Pakistani perpetrators, most notably in Rotherham and Telford, and also elsewhere.
What would your grandma be doing when these men were forcing themselves on you?
Usually laughing or smiling or having sex with another man or other men.
A chronicle of debauchery and depravity so horrific it's hard to believe. You have to ask yourself, could Teresa be just making it up?
Now, it is worth pointing out that throughout mainstream media, in times current and in times past, we see a fascination with children in unhealthy ways, and that's ravaged our society in all sorts of ways. The term child sex rings has been used in the media historically over the last 50 years, and it's mostly been referred to in terms of offenders at a ground, local level, on the street day to day, but also celebrity culture. British celebrity culture has been very, very well exposed and concealed in this regard. According to Shemmings and Pascoe 2019 in their book Child Abuse, an evidence base for confident practice, they say the following: "We have seen the exposure of paedophiles working as high-profile celebrities in the media, including in the UK, Jimmy Savile, Rolf Harris, Paul Gadd, aka Larry Gitter, and the list goes on." According to C.J.P. Lee, 2005, titled Pervasive Perversions, Paedophilia and Child Sexual Abuse in the Media, he says the following: "In recent years, United Kingdom has had several high-profile sexual abuse cases made public. For example, a 2016 report estimated that Jimmy Savile, a television and radio personality who died in 2011, may have abused as many as 500 children over several decades. His youngest victim was 10 years old. Other scandals have involved football, soccer, coaches, clergy, and politicians." Reason number one: right-wing stigmatisation of any white Brits that mention this issue. This is very true. It happens across all sorts of issues, really. Certain people are allowed to mention certain things about certain subjects. If someone who we don't like is speaking about the subject, we get sort of defensive. And unfortunately, especially with the issue of child grooming, there's a incorrect belief that the truth is racist. As one comment reads, "It's funny how you report this with sincerity and gravitas, and yet when the issue was first raised 15 years ago by a particular patriotic individual," I think we all know who that is, "and a local councillor, they were rubbished and told that they were racist. It could have been stopped back then, but instead the police decided it was easier to turn a blind eye." Similarly, Donald Trump said that there were areas in the UK where the police will not venture, and was totally correct. But again, he was ridiculed. Another comment reads, "They will be described as EN or taxi drivers, and the victims will be young girls. No ethnicities will be mentioned, except in very small number of cases where a white man was involved. Then those faces will be the poster boys of the investigation. A few years ago, a drama was made about the Pakistani grooming gangs. It hardly drew any interest from the media, and it also made the young girls out to be very racist, which, unsurprisingly, some of them ended up becoming." That's very true. It's not just true for this issue. I've even seen it on my own channel. If I do a documentary about white British crime in certain areas of the UK, I'll be called a left wing. And I'm sure as I'm doing this documentary about British Pakistani crime, I'm going to be called right-wing. So it's just sort of very similar to the analogy when someone is speaking about their parents. You know, if I go around speaking about my dad and I say, oh, I can't stand my dad, I can't stand my mum, that's fine. But then when somebody from the outside says, yeah, man, your mum, yeah, your dad's easy, yeah, I can't stand him, then I might want to be a bit defensive. So it is a human instinct for us to be sensitive over outsiders calling out who we are, but it is very important and very vital to this conversation, and we have to remember that the truth is not racist. So that's point number one, and that's a very fair point. Right-wing stigmatization. If white Brits mention this issue, we turn it into something else, and that can be true. Another belief is that there are few British Pakistani female voices about this issue. A lot of people who are not from the British Pakistani community are asking, where are the women? Are they coming out? Where are they? Are they coming out? Are they speaking? Why is it that we don't hear their voice? This particular comment is very insightful. As a British Pakistani female, I can't give you a definitive answer as to why some Pakistani men commit such horrendous crime, but will say that from a young age, females and males in our culture are treated very differently. Young men are given a lot of freedom to do as they please with pretty much zero consequences if caught doing anything wrong. For young girls, it's the complete opposite. You are given no freedom and are kept under the thumb of your father or brother, and are told if you don't toe the line, there will be severe repercussions. Hence, the men in our community grow up to be out of control monsters, answerable to no one, who are used to treating their own women like dogs, hit and getting away with it. This is not an ethnic issue, but a Muslim issue. Moroccans, Somalis, and Bengalis or Bangladeshis are doing it too. It doesn't have to be all Muslims for it to be a Muslim issue. It's not a Pakistani problem, it's a Muslim problem. In India, Christian, Hindu, and Sikh girls are targeted. They call it love jihad. A movie called Kerala Story that came out on the subject caused a big controversy and was branded Islamophobic. I checked out this movie and, well, surprise, surprise, either to agree or disagree with that statement, that movie has been banned or tarnished from being released in the UK. So there's some weight to that comment. Another comment reads, in India, it's called love jihad, trap jihad, predator jihad. In the UK, it's called grooming jihad. A belief that no one will get caught. Check this comment out. I am from Halifax. This problem goes on over dozens of towns, not just Rotherham or Rochdale. A few years ago, 30 plus perpetrators from Halifax and Bradford were prosecuted. Only a few weeks after that, men of their characteristic were driving around where I lived in broad daylight in the afternoon trying to pick up primary school age girls in their cars. Most of these types of men do not care about the prosecutions because most of them do not get caught. The vast majority, they just carry on. It is very difficult to get hard evidence, or from what I know, even when the police or social services are involved, it carries on because of threats to the girls' families. They dare not speak out. This is how despicable the crime is. Also, having learned a lot about Islam and jihad, I can see that there are religious and racist elements to it. They totally disrespect and hate our culture. The kafirs and unbelievers to them, who must be destroyed in the end, destroyed or subjugated. It is all disgusting. In-group solidarity. In-group solidarity is very, very true. This is the perception that the British Pakistani community are very difficult to infiltrate, very difficult to break up, very difficult to separate. And it's funny because that's usually a good stick that many non-Asian communities living in Britain have traditionally looked up to these Asian or these Southeast Asian communities for is their ability to be very well unified, very well dignified, very solid. They don't allow people to come in between them, but obviously with regards to this issue, that's a problem. Now, statistically speaking, local long-standing community solidarity is declining in Britain as we become more materialistic, as we become more aesthetic, and as we become more self-serving and self-driven. Generation after the generation of 50 years ago is different from the generation in 2024, and it's going to decline and get waterier, if there's such a word, or get watered down, should I say. And there is a video which I'm going to show now of Muslim women or British Pakistani women, I believe. I hope that's the case. There are videos of British Pakistani women coming out and speaking about the atrocities of this heinous activity.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is a very uncomfortable topic for us to talk about. You right? Yeah. I think the reason why we're doing this TikTok is so that we can gradually open up about our past, and this obviously has been brought to the police's attention, but I think my sister's feeling too uncomfortable to open up. But the truth is, oh God, the sexual abuse wasn't just done, so it was early exposure of everything else from my dad, and inappropriate sexualization, forced marriage. When we were early in our childhood, we were engaged at age 10 and 9, and just basically telling us that we didn't have an opinion, that if we opened up that we would become home wreckers, and the truth, unfortunately, a lie held the family together. Unfortunately, it was my half sister had married my dad's biological brother, and there's a lot of incest involved, unfortunately for us, and a lot of unreligious practices, the best way to put it, or unhumane practices.
Bloody parliamentarians. Britain's biggest issue is third-rate councils and fourth-rate parliamentarians. We deserve what we get until we select capable, truthful and honest men and women with decent national values. Most current politicians throw the country under the bus to please the left-wing European lot. Historical origins. So India also has had such a gang, actually, of Islamic clerics. The case was called the 1992 Amja case. The case has been the worst organised case India has ever seen. Hope people don't get radicalised anymore. Yeah, that's very true. The Amja case, or the Amja scandal, was basically a series of gang rapes and blackmailing in which 250 female students in either schools or colleges aged between 11 and 20 years old were reportedly victims of this crime. Most of the victims belong to Sophia Senior Secondary School in Amja, which continues to operate to this day. Another comment reads, Sikhs and Muslims have an historic rivalry. Mughal Muslims took over India, and the Sikhs in Punjab, with a limited army, fought back as Sikhs back in the 17th century were forcefully converted or tortured if they didn't give up their Sikh faith. The women were raped and their babies were tied around their necks in pieces. But to date, not a single one of those Sikhs accepted Islam and happily embraced death. In 1705, the Battle of Chamkaur had 40 famished Sikh warriors face 1 million Mughals. Each Sikh warrior, under the leadership of our 10th master, took down hundreds of Mughals and none converted, but it humiliated the Mughals. Sikhs are a warrior race that helps their communities wherever they settle. We also provided a lot of guidance and protection to white British girls in those Labour constituencies. Our Slough Gurdwara did also set up to accommodate the needs of young white girls who need help if they're being groomed. We are still facing grooming issues in Britain, in universities, and young female Indian paying students coming to England are being preyed upon by Pakistani groomers. A lot of Muslim men over the years disguised themselves as Sikh men to trap Sikh girls, where the white working class girls, it was a sexual motive. With Sikhs, the Pakistanis wanted to convert them to and rub salt into the Sikh community. Being aided by white women, parents of the children, and those in authority. This is very true. There are beliefs and there are people out there that believe that why this is continuing is because, well, as I've shown or implied even in this little video so far, those in authority, they're both aware and some are partaking. Remember that these groomers, they don't just groom the children, they groom the parents of the children by befriending them, trusting them, giving them gifts, and showing themselves to be trustworthy around the children. And they also get some of these girls not just to be victims, but they use some of them as accomplices to invite further women and further girls into destruction. Very, very clever, but very, very horrific. So this point just speaks about how they're being aided, which is personally true. Incorrect media or incorrect British media representation. Guardian journalists, pretty blunt, Guardian journalists are still categorically arguing that this is not a problem with Muslim males of mainly Pakistani origin, and they're still claiming that to say that this is such a problem is racist or dog whistle racism or other cliches. Thus, if such Guardian journalists had their way, this problem would never have been covered in the first place, and it would not be allowed, or it would be allowed to get far more widespread and far more extreme. It seems then that these journalists are demanding that more and more young white women be sacrificed to the god of anti-racism. Literally nothing can trump what's deemed to be righteous anti-racism, not even racism towards white working class girls. Attitudes were different in the 1970s to 1990s. The working class needed to be civilized by the establishment. Look into the introduction of children's television on BBC and their charter. It shows how they believed it was their responsibility to train nice little citizens. Working class young teenage girls were viewed as scrubbers, rude, coarse, out of control, promiscuous tarts. It's shocking how fast perceptions have changed. Now they are seen as victims. Correct, in my opinion. When the issues of grooming gangs started to be recognized, terrorism was the government's highest priority. They desperately needed these communities to cooperate with them. They believed that arresting and prosecuting large numbers of Pakistani men would stop Muslims coming forward if they knew a terrorist attack was being planned. I think that this is racist. On average, of all the rapes reported to the British police, less than 3% ever successfully prosecute in court. It takes on average at least 2.5 years to reach court. A normal case is very complex and delicate, e.g. the victim often changes their mind about testifying, it costs a lot of money to investigate grooming gangs, the risk of the accused travelling to Pakistan before the trial starts is high, etc. Most people convicted of don't even get sentenced a very long time anyways. Yeah, that's very true. I think I agree with that. Sometimes we are more passionate about the downfall of the alleged perpetrators than we are of the fixing of the corrupt and cost-weary system to find them out, that's meant to prosecute them and investigate them. So anyway, guys, thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any comments. Let me know your thoughts and opinions. And hopefully we'll keep these videos coming. All the best.